My name is Eliza Monroe. I'm 29 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had my life figured out in the quiet, boring way people don't appreciate until it's gone. 4 years with someone does that to you. It makes you stop imagining exits. It makes you start buying things together that aren't romantic, like a better vacuum or a nicer set of plates, because you're planning for normal, not for disaster. I met my boyfriend, Brandon Cole, at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was charming in that clean, polished way. Good smile, steady eye contact, the kind of man who makes you feel like you're the only person in the room even when he's surrounded by people. We hit it off immediately. Within 6 months, we were living together. Back then, I told myself we were the same kind of ambitious, just in different languages. I built my life with patience. Brandon built his with momentum. Brandon worked in marketing at a tech startup, always chasing the next campaign, the next connection, the next room he wanted to be seen in. He had that hunger. The kind that looks impressive from the outside and exhausting from the inside. I respected it. I admired it. And I think for a long time I tried to earn it. Because when you love someone who's always climbing, you start to wonder if you're standing still, even when you're the one holding the ladder. The night everything fell apart was supposed to be a celebration. His company had closed a major deal, and Brandon decided we were hosting a party at our apartment. Not suggested, not discussed, decided. Just a few people, he'd said earlier that week, already scrolling through his guest list like the event belonged to him more than it belonged to our home. Then he leaned over and kissed my forehead like that made it sweet. I spent the entire day cleaning. Not because I'm obsessed with spotless counters, because I knew the kind of people Brandon was inviting. The kind that looks at your baseboards like they're reading your future. I vacuumed twice. I wiped down the fridge handles. I lined up bottles on the counter like I was staging a photo for a catalog. Brandon floated through the apartment in and out of phone calls, half-dressed, energized, talking in that bright tone he used when he wanted to sound important. And every time his screen lit up, I saw the same name more than once. Brianna, his boss, his mentor, the woman he said was just helping him level up. I'd heard that phrase so many times I could have written it on a mug. I didn't accuse, I didn't interrogate. I'd learned that asking too many questions made Brandon act like I was holding him back. So I swallowed my discomfort and kept wiping surfaces that didn't need wiping. By 8 o'clock, our apartment looked perfect. Too perfect. Like it didn't belong to real people with real problems. Around 30 guests showed up. Brandon's coworkers, friends, and a handful of people I didn't know. Faces that scanned the room the moment they stepped in, assessing everything we owned like it was part of a resume. Music filled the space. Laughter bounced off the walls. Glass clinked. Brandon moved through the crowd like a host on a stage, arm around shoulders, head thrown back, smiling wide. And every time someone complimented the place, he said thanks, like he was the one who'd spent the day making it shine. I stayed busy, refilling snacks, replacing ice, collecting empty cups before they turned into sticky rings on the furniture I'd paid for. It felt normal at first. It felt manageable. Until I walked into the kitchen, grabbed another bag of ice from the freezer, and heard Brandon's voice cut clean through the music like a blade. Honestly, he said, I don't even know why I'm still with her. I froze with the ice in my hands. At first, I thought I misheard. Your brain does that when the truth is too sharp. But then I heard the laughter. Not mine. Not kind. I stepped forward just enough to see the balcony area through the doorway. Brandon stood with 3 coworkers, drinks in hand, bodies angled toward him like he was telling a story worth hearing. One of them, someone I didn't recognize, said, "Come on, she seems nice." Brandon laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind of laugh that says, "You don't get it." "Nice doesn't pay for a lifestyle," he said. I felt the words hit my ribs like a fist. Another coworker raised an eyebrow. Damn. Brandon kept going, because that's what people do when they feel safe being cruel. "Nice doesn't get you into the rooms that matter," he added. "I need someone who matches my energy. Someone who's going places." My fingers tightened around the plastic bag until the ice cracked inside it. And the worst part wasn't even the insult. It was the way he said it, like a conclusion he'd reached a long time ago. Then Brandon turned his head. Our eyes locked for 2 seconds. Just 2. And in that moment, I waited, stupidly, for shame. But Brandon didn't look embarrassed. He looked annoyed. I walked out of the kitchen calmly. I set the ice down on the table beside them. And Brandon raised his voice just enough for people nearby to hear. "You'll never be good enough for me." The room went quiet. My chest tightened. So I smiled. Not a happy smile. A survival smile. I looked at him and said softly, "Maybe you're right." His mouth twitched like he expected more. I reached for my keys. And I walked out. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. Around midnight, I checked into a budget hotel near the airport. When I woke up, my phone had 47 missed calls and over 100 texts, most from Brandon. I ignored all of them except one. It was from Nina, one of Brandon's coworkers who'd always been friendly to me. Her message said, "You know what Brandon said after you left?" I typed back, "What?" Her reply came a few seconds later. He laughed and said, "Good. Now I don't have to break up with her before the Monaco trip. Brianna's going to be so much easier to deal with." I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, like changing the speed might make the sentence mean something else. Monaco. Brianna. Easier to deal with. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed and felt the room tilt. Not because I was dizzy, but because everything I thought I understood about the last year of my life suddenly rearranged itself. Brandon's late nights. The networking dinners. The trips he said were last minute, but somehow always had luxury hotels. The way he'd started dressing differently for work, sharper, more deliberate, while telling me I was overthinking when I asked questions. I hadn't been insecure. I'd been excluded. I typed back to Nina. "Are you sure?" The response was immediate. "I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't." I set the phone down. For a full 20 minutes, I didn't move. I just stared at the wall across from me, at the faint outline where a picture frame used to hang, and tried to remember the last time Brandon had looked at me like I was the future instead of a placeholder. Then I did something I'm not proud of, but I'm not sorry for it either. I picked up my laptop and logged into our shared cloud account, the one we used for photos, tax documents, and random things like warranties for appliances we'd bought together. Brandon had never changed the password. Because why would he? People like him don't expect consequences from the people they underestimate. The dashboard loaded. Folders appeared. Vacations, apartment, receipts, work. And then one I'd never noticed before. Work trips. My chest went tight again, but this time there was a strange clarity wrapped around it, like my emotions had stepped aside to let my instincts drive. I clicked. The folder opened. Dozens of subfolders populated the screen, each named after a city. Miami, New York, Chicago, Paris. My fingers hovered for half a second before clicking the first one. Miami. Photos loaded. Brandon and Brianna at a rooftop bar, city lights behind them, her hand resting just a little too comfortably on his arm. Next photo, the same hotel room, different angle, champagne bottle on the nightstand. 2 glasses, one robe tossed over a chair. I scrolled. New York. A mirror selfie in what was very clearly a suite bathroom. Brandon's reflection behind her, hands on her waist. The timestamp showed it had been taken 9 months ago. 9 months. That was when he'd told me work was intense and he needed space to focus. When he'd stopped answering texts during the day and started coming home already showered. I felt something cold spread through my chest. Not shock anymore, but recalibration. I kept scrolling. Paris. A balcony view. The Eiffel Tower blurred in the background. Brandon's arm visible in the frame, sleeve rolled up, the watch I'd given him for his birthday catching the light. I closed my eyes, not because I was overwhelmed, because I needed to breathe before I broke something. When I opened them again, I noticed details I hadn't before. My espresso machine on the counter in one photo. My sweater, draped over the back of a chair in another. This wasn't a secret life built separately from mine. It was built on top of it, as if I were the base layer he assumed no one would ever peel back. Then I saw another folder. Smaller, almost hidden. Archive. I clicked it. Inside were older photos. Fewer, less polished. Brandon with another woman. Dark hair, sharp smile, confident posture. The metadata dated the images too before he and I met. The folder name read, Trish. I stared at the name longer than I expected to. I knew about Trish, technically. Brandon had mentioned her once or twice early in our relationship. An ex. It ended badly, he'd said, which in his language usually meant she asked questions I didn't want to answer. But here she was again, buried but not deleted. I clicked a photo. Brandon and Trish sat across from each other at what looked like a cafe. Her expression was unreadable. His smile was careful, practiced. In the corner of the image, half-cropped, was a folded document on the table between them. I couldn't see what it said, but I didn't like that it existed. I closed the laptop. Not slammed, not dramatically. Just enough to signal a decision had been made. I wasn't going to confront him immediately. I wasn't going to scream or cry or demand explanations. Because explanations are what people like Brandon use to blur facts until you doubt your own eyesight. Instead, I opened a notes app and typed a single sentence. Document everything. That became my anchor. I ordered takeout. I ate mechanically. I slept a few hours at a time. For the next 3 days, I stayed in that hotel and turned myself into a quiet archivist of my own life. I pulled bank statements, credit card histories, screenshots of texts where Brandon had asked me to cover rent just this once because his bonus was delayed. Once, then again, then consistently. I made spreadsheets, color-coded them. I matched dates to photos. Trips he said were mandatory lined up perfectly with withdrawals and charges that had nothing to do with work. By the end of day 3, I wasn't crying anymore. I was angry, but not recklessly so. Anger, when controlled, sharpens you. On day 4, I packed my bag and drove back to the apartment, the place that still smelled like perfume and spilled drinks and unfinished conversations. When I unlocked the door, Brandon was sitting on the couch. His eyes were red. He looked small. For a moment, just a moment, the version of him I used to love flickered back to life in my chest. Then he stood up and said, "Where have you been? I've been worried sick." Worried. I set my bag down slowly. "Have you?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "You just left. You didn't say anything." I met his eyes. "You told 30 people I wasn't good enough for you," I said, my voice steady. "What exactly did you expect me to say after that?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then sighed like I was the inconvenience. "I was drunk," he said. "I didn't mean it like that." "Which part?" I asked. "The part where you said I don't match your energy, or the part where you said I can't afford your lifestyle?" His expression shifted. The concern slid off. The calculation slid in. "You were eavesdropping," he said. "That's not fair. You were talking about me 10 feet away." He crossed his arms. "Look, I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt, but you've been coasting for years. I'm out there building something, making connections. I need more than comfortable." I nodded once. "Does Brianna give you more than comfortable?" His eyes widened. Just for a second. But it was enough. "Who told you that?" he asked, then stopped himself. "It's not what you think." I lied. Nina showed me the photos. I watched him carefully. If he were innocent, he'd be confused. If he were guilty, he'd improvise. Brandon improvised. "We're co-workers," he said quickly. "Those were work trips. You're being paranoid." I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, opened the cloud folder, and held it up. A photo of him and Brianna, in bathrobes, in the same hotel room, clearly not working. The color drained from his face. "Get out," I said. He laughed once, hollow. "This is my apartment too." "Actually," I replied calmly, "according to the lease and the payment history, I've covered 70% of the rent for 2 years." I stepped closer. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack a bag and leave tonight. Then you're going to find somewhere else to stay while we figure out how to break the lease." He stared at me. "And if you fight me on any of this," I continued, "I'll send these photos to HR. I looked up the policy. They have a strict no fraternization rule between supervisors and subordinates." He swallowed. "You wouldn't." I met his gaze. "Try me." Brandon didn't yell. That was the strangest part. He just stood there, staring at me like he was recalculating a route he'd already committed to. Like the script in his head had gone off the rails and he was scrambling to improvise a new ending. "You're overreacting," he said finally. "This is unnecessary." Unnecessary. I almost laughed. Instead, I stepped back and gestured toward the bedroom. "You have an hour," I said. "Pack what you need." He hesitated, clearly waiting for me to soften. For the woman he thought he knew to reappear, apologetic, emotional, willing to negotiate her own dignity. She didn't, so he packed, sloppily, loudly, opening and closing drawers harder than needed, like noise could punish me for not crying. I stayed in the living room the entire time, didn't follow him, didn't ask questions. I sat on the armchair and scrolled through my phone because I'd learned something important over the last few days. Silence unnerves people who expect control. When he came out with the duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he paused at the door. "This isn't over," he said. It sounded like a threat. It sounded like a promise. I didn't respond. The door closed behind him with a click that felt far too small for how final it was. I stood there for a long time after he left. The apartment felt hollow, not empty, hollow, like something had been scooped out and left the structure behind. That night I didn't sleep, not because I was heartbroken, because my mind wouldn't slow down. By morning, I'd already made the first call. A lawyer. Not a dramatic one, not a courtroom bulldog. A quiet, methodical woman recommended by a coworker who'd gone through a messy separation involving shared property. She listened while I explained everything. The rent split, the shared purchases, the cloud folder, the HR policy. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said one sentence that reset my entire approach. "Emotionally, you're ahead of this. Legally, you need to stay that way." She asked me to email everything. Everything. Bank statements, credit card records, texts, photos. "You don't need revenge," she said. "You need leverage. That became my operating principle. I turned my pain into paperwork. I pulled 2 years of bank statements and highlighted every rent payment, every utilities bill, every grocery run that came out of my account. 70% wasn't an estimate. It was conservative. The couch? Mine. The TV? Mine. The espresso machine Brandon loved to show off to guests? Mine. I found receipts I didn't even remember keeping. Because somewhere along the line, I'd started documenting without knowing why. Like a part of me had always suspected I'd need proof one day. By noon, I'd built a spreadsheet that told a story Brandon never expected anyone to read. One where his career investment had been subsidized by my stability. One where temporary help became a permanent pattern. I sent it all to the lawyer. She replied an hour later. "This is solid. Don't engage with him. Don't respond to messages. If he shows up, call me." He did message. Of course he did. At first, it was apology adjacent. "We should talk. You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't mean to hurt you." Then it shifted. "You're being controlling. You always had to be right. You never supported my growth." I didn't respond to any of it. Silence became my shield. On the second day after he left, I went back to the apartment with boxes. I didn't rush. I packed only what was undeniably mine. Clothes, documents, personal items. I left the rest exactly where it was. Let him remember what the space looked like when I still believed in us. That night, I changed the locks. Technically against the lease. I knew that. I didn't care. Some rules stop applying when the person you're protecting yourself from knows exactly how to hurt you. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Nina again. Her voice was tight, stripped of pleasantries. "You need to hear this," she said. "Now." I sat down. "What's going on?" She exhaled. "Brandon's telling people you were abusive." The word landed wrong, like it didn't belong in the sentence. "What?" I said. "He's saying you controlled his money," she continued, "that you isolated him, that he felt trapped." Cold spread through me, fast and sharp. "That's not—" I stopped myself. "Where is he saying this?" "Everywhere," she said. "Private messages, group chats. He posted a story last night." My chest tightened. "What kind of story?" "A long one," she said quietly. "About escaping a toxic relationship. About finding the courage to leave. People are eating it up." I closed my eyes. I could see it without seeing it. The careful wording, the vague accusations, the way he'd never use my name, but wouldn't need to. "He's rewriting everything," I said. "I know," Nina replied. "That's why I'm telling you. I was there. I saw how he treated you. But Eliza, he's good at this." I opened my laptop. "Can you screenshot everything?" I asked. "Posts, messages, comments." "I already started," she said. "I'll send them." When we hung up, my hands were shaking. Not with fear, with restraint. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the photos, the spreadsheets, the receipts. I wanted to blow his story apart in public and watch it burn. But I didn't, because my lawyer had warned me. People like this want a reaction. Let them talk. Truth works better when it arrives quietly. So I stayed quiet. For several days. Then Brandon escalated. He posted publicly, not just to close friends, to everyone. A long, emotional post about healing. About finding himself again. About leaving a narcissistic partner who never believed in his dreams. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. Within minutes, comments poured in. Supportive, sympathetic, applauding his bravery. My phone started buzzing. Friends checking in. Acquaintances sending carefully worded messages that felt more like assessments than concern. And then I saw it. A comment near the top. From Brianna. "So proud of you for choosing yourself. I'm here for you." I stared at the screen. And for the first time since this started, I smiled. Not a survival smile. A knowing one. Because Brandon had just made a mistake. And he didn't even realize it yet. I didn't respond to Brianna's comment. I didn't like it. I didn't screenshot it immediately either. I let it sit there, glowing on my screen like a lit fuse. By the end of that day, my lawyer had already seen it. Her reply was short. "Do nothing. This helps us." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not peacefully, but decisively. 2 days later, Brandon tried to come back. He didn't knock. He texted, "I need to grab a few things. This doesn't have to be hostile." I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "I'll leave a box outside the door tomorrow at noon." There was a pause. Then, "You're really doing this?" I didn't answer. At exactly 12 the next day, I placed a medium-sized box outside the apartment door. Inside were his clothes, his laptop charger, a framed photo of us I couldn't bring myself to throw away yet, and nothing else. I closed the door. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was him. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. "Eliza," he said, voice tight, carefully emotional. "You're being unreasonable. We should talk like adults. You can't just erase 4 years because you're hurt." I deleted it, An hour after that, Nina texted me. He's losing control. He keeps asking who you're talking to. He thought you'd beg by now. I read that twice, because it confirmed something I'd been circling since the party. Brandon didn't expect silence. He expected collapse. He expected me to panic, to scramble, to do something messy he could later point to and say, "See, this is what I dealt with." Instead, I'd given him nothing, and that scared him. That evening, my lawyer called. "They've opened a preliminary inquiry," she said. My grip tightened on the phone. HR? Yes, someone filed an anonymous report, likely more than one. I didn't ask who. I already knew. "They'll review internal communications, expense reports, travel approvals," she continued. "You stay out of it. If you're contacted, loop me in." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the empty chair across from me. The chair Brandon used to sit in while scrolling through emails, nodding absently as I talked about my day. The chair he'd occupied, physically, long after he'd already left emotionally. That night he posted again. Another story. More vague language. More carefully crafted pain. But this time, something was different. People weren't just comforting him. They were asking questions. "What happened? Who hurt you? Are you safe now?" He liked every comment. He replied to just enough to look wounded without looking unstable. And then, inevitably, he pushed too far. He shared a screenshot. A cropped text exchange. Out of context. One of my messages from months earlier. "I feel like I'm always the one holding things together." He captioned it. "This is what manipulation looks like." My hand shook when I saw it. Not because I doubted myself, but because I realized how dangerous he was willing to be. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Her reply came fast. "Do not engage. Keep saving everything." The next morning, I got an unexpected email from the property management company. They'd received a call from Brandon asking about his rights as a tenant and whether the lock change was legal. I forwarded that too. By noon, my lawyer had drafted a formal notice. By evening, Brandon had stopped posting. Silence, the kind that doesn't feel peaceful. The kind that feels like someone regrouping. 2 days later, Nina called me from a quiet stairwell. "They're done," she said. "Who?" "HR. They wrapped the investigation this afternoon." My heart didn't race. It sank. "Both of them?" I asked. "Yes." I closed my eyes. Firing someone isn't cinematic. There's no explosion. No justice music. Just consequences. "He tried to spin it," Nina continued. "Said Brianna pressured him. Said he felt trapped. Said he didn't know how to say no." I almost laughed. "Almost. And Brianna?" I asked. "She blamed him. Said he pursued her. Said she tried to keep it professional." I exhaled slowly. People like that don't fall together. They fracture. That night, my phone rang from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through seconds later. "Eliza," Brandon said, voice raw now. "This is your fault. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle me being successful. I hope you're happy." I listened once, then deleted it. A week later, I ran into one of his former coworkers at a coffee shop. She hesitated, then walked over. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I believed him. I shouldn't have." "It's okay," I replied. "No," she said, "it's not. He's doing it again. He's telling people Brianna manipulated him, that she scared him into the affair." I nodded. I wasn't surprised, just tired. "Good luck to him," I said. The day after Nina told me HR was done, I moved out. Not because I had to, because I wanted the distance. I broke the lease, paid the penalty, and didn't argue when the number made me wince. I found a smaller place across town. 1 bedroom, quiet street. No history embedded in the walls. The first night there, I slept with the windows open and realized something unsettling. I wasn't grieving him. I was detoxing. Weeks passed. The noise faded. Mutual friends stopped sending cautious check-ins. At work, something unexpected happened. I got called into my manager's office. Instead of tension, she smiled. "We want to expand your role," she said. "You've been steady under pressure. That matters." I walked out with a small promotion and a larger sense of grounding. I went back to the gym, not to punish my body, to remind it that it was mine. I went on a date. Just one. Nothing dramatic. But I laughed easily, and I didn't feel like I'd shrunk myself to fit someone else's expectations. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that party. Standing in my own apartment, holding a bag of melting ice, listening to the man I loved tell strangers I wasn't good enough. And the strange thing is, he was right. Just not in the way he meant. I wasn't good enough to lie to myself. I wasn't good enough to stay small so someone else could feel big. I wasn't good enough to be convenient. I'm good enough for me now. And that's the only standard that matters.